editing Carrie here. As you'll see in the next few minutes, this project was off to a really rough start. The first thing that happened was I just neglected to record. So I don't know whether I didn't press the button or whether something happened with my camera. But in either case, me applying the dye did not get captured on film, or digital film as it were. So we enter the dyeing process with all the dye powder already put onto the wet yarn. The yarn has been soaked in acid water. So the yarn was wet and then the dry powder was added to that. The next thing that seems to be going wrong is the water is, as it's being heated, is draining out of the yarn and taking all the dye color with it. You can hear the frustration in my voice as this happens, and so I considered not showing this video at all and just forgetting the whole thing, but I think it's important to see the failures as well as the successes. And this project didn't end up being a failure after all. It ended up being exactly what I wanted. It just took some bumps in the road to get to that point. And I think it's kind of important to see those bumps in the road. So if you hang in with me to the end of the project, there's a finished item that I'm quite happy with at the end. What we also missed at the very beginning is this is Briggs & Little Heritage yarn, and this is a full skein of this yarn. It's not soft yarn, it's not a luxury yarn, it's quite a basic yarn, great for rugs and things like that. So I assumed it would be a good yarn for the project of making mug rugs. So now we'll go back to the dyeing and weaving Carrie in the dye kitchen. Oh geez, I don't know if I videotaped this at all. It turned off. Or maybe I didn't press play. That's disappointing. So in case I missed all of that previous video, I just added dry powder to a damp yarn and pressed it into place. Added a little bit of acidic water after the fact. But I'm going for a beach vibe here. I've got three blues and a bluish green and two different browns, pink sand and mochaccino, to do the beach. And in the water I've got a couple of zip ties in here to preserve some whites, so we have some white highlights. And the heat's on to just sort of get it going, just getting it to set. It's already flipped once and a little bit more pigment added, but yeah. After it's heated a little bit, I'll flip it again and add some water, and then hopefully it will have mostly set. Now that the heat's been on it for a little bit, I want to flip it again so the color doesn't all just settle on one side. Oh, look how much liquid there is. Interesting, considering the liquid was in the yarn and now it seems to be pulling out of the yarn. I think I like that brown better than what I had before. Looks like it's going to be brown rather than turn purple, which is great. So I'm going to wait about 20 minutes. Watch it, make sure it doesn't burn before I add some water in order to bring up the water level and heat everything thoroughly. Okay, I'm actually surprised at how much is not entering the yarn, at how much dye is still free in the water. That's quite interesting. Look at all this blue. Didn't think I added that much dye, but evidently I did. Look how dark this water is. This yarn and water is. Again, I'm going to lift up this end by putting a spoon under so that the blue doesn't move up into the browns. And I'm going to add a bit of water. Look at the brown leave the yarn. That's not the purpose of adding the water. Oh, wow. And I don't know why it's not, why the heat and the acid is not causing the, I wonder if I should just steam this before all the blue ends up in the brown. I think I might just pull it out and steam it. I'm going to let it heat for a bit before I make that call. The way this yarn releases water and dye is just crazy to me. Look at the dye just oozing out of here. That is not something I'm used to seeing, as it just keeps moving out and moving up. Like, look at the dye come squeezing out of here. It's very unusual. Usually when you move the yarn around, it absorbs the dye more. It doesn't release it. Like, we're seeing this dye just oozing and pouring out of here into the water. And yeah, just crazy. I don't think there was too much dye for the yarn, but look at it coming out. And it's coming, the brown's coming out too, so it's not just a matter of, you know, one color. The brown just keeps leaching out and it's getting paler and paler. And there's a weird halo thing going on. You can see the water here glistening as, I don't know, there's something different about this wool. It was difficult to get it wet. It doesn't seem to sort of suck up liquid, and the liquid it does suck up, it's quick to release it again. I don't know, this, I don't want to lose the browns. And when I lift this, the browns ooze out of the water. I mean, ooze out of the yarn and into the water, and then just, you know, come down here and join the blues. And look at the blues wanting to go visit the browns up there. What's going on? I don't know if it's clearing or not, but I'm gonna keep heating it. I want to be able to fill this with water so that everything will heat and set. But I can't see even the inside. Usually this is turning clear in the inside. Yeah, very, very strange wool. I've heard it doesn't felt well. It doesn't full when you weave with it. So I think there's some characteristic to this Briggs and Little heritage that it seems to be treated with something. Almost. I don't know. Anyway, we'll just let it keep heating and we'll see what happens. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this out because it's starting to soak up some of this blue. I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to add more acid water to this, and I want this water to turn clear. Then I'll drop this back in and finish heat setting this. Look at how it's causing the blue to come out of the water. Crazy. And of course my concern is that the brown dye here is now draining out of the yarn and, you know, back into this part rather than staying put in here. Very weird how this yarn is so quick to release water and dye. So we're gonna try to get this water to clear completely. And then I can drop the brown back in, because this brown is starting to soak up blue and it's becoming greenish. And I really do want to preserve some of this sand color. So lots of acid, lots of water. Let's absorb this. Because there's turquoise in here, this may not clear. So I am going to give up on this, but I don't believe that this brown part has had enough heat. This brown part, which is starting to turn green in places. So I'm going to steam it to get it to finish. It's just draining blue. So we're going to put it in here like that. The blue over here, the brown here, and I'm going to put it in the steamer pot. Here. And I have a few cups of water in the bottom, and I'm going to heat it. And steam it for 40 minutes or an hour or so to set the dye. And this blue water, I'm just going to let it cool down, and then I'll save it and I'll be able to dye something with this blue, I believe. So here's the finished skein of yarn. It's got great bounce now that it's completely dry. And this is a bit on the orange side, but I don't mind it. There's some Cape Breton beaches that have sand that lean orange, so I'm okay with that. A little bit of the white remained, and then we have turquoise and a variety of blues. I'm not sure if the camera's picking up all the different blues that are present in this skein, but they're there down the length. So I think this is going to give some depth to our mug rugs. So we've got sand, surf, and water, and I'm hoping that it all comes together in a nice self-striping colorway. And this is a little thicker wool than I've used before, so I'm hoping that means that it weaves up quicker too. Let's head to the Rigid Heddle loom. So I just warped up the Rigid Heddle again. This is a long warp. I didn't measure it, but it took all my packing papers, so probably longest warp I've put on yet. Ugh, I might be regretting it. I used the this cotton here, which is a bluish toned green. It's called Peacock, and it is 100%, let me find this, 100% organic cotton. So I'm just going to tie it onto the front, and then I can start weaving with my new yarn. So here it is, wound into a ball. And a bit of a comparison. This is the previous one that I dyed up, and this one was supposed to have brown in it, but it ended up with just little areas of purple. And so this is definitely brown. Also, a note of comparison, this was the first set of mug rugs, and I've gone progressively fatter in my choice of yarns. So what that means is that it will weave up faster. And so I guess I'm testing to see how thick a yarn I can go and still have it cover the warp on cotton that's set at 5 ends per inch. So as the yarn gets thicker, it's faster weaving, and so that is something to think about, especially if I'm making these for sale. I can't be trying to make a weft-faced rug with very thin yarn. It looks nice, but it does take a long time and doesn't make a whole lot of sense financially. So now it's time to put this on a shuttle and start weaving. So the pattern's quite pleasing, actually. I like the color order. This blue is the header, this bright blue at the beginning, so that's not part of it. So there's definitely an ocean feel going on here, which I'm really liking. And I like the thickness of the yarn. It's building up quickly, not taking forever to weave an inch, like with some of the lighter wools I was using. So I think this is just right. So from now on, I think my yarn of choice for the mug rugs are going to be the Briggs & Little Heritage 2-ply yarn. It's 100% wool. And it's made right here in the Maritimes of Canada. It's made in New Brunswick, the Briggs & Little Woolen Mills. So this is readily available right here. In fact, we can buy it at our dollar store. Not for $1 though. And so I think that's what I'm going to be using from now on. And I'll see what other colorways I can create for the mug rugs. One thing with doing this on my Rigid Heddle loom, I'm finding that this is the Ashford Samplit. I'm finding that the front beam is also the cloth beam. Let me move that. Yeah, so in a lot of looms we have a front beam that the weaving wraps around, and then down lower here we've got a cloth beam where the cloth builds up, the woven part builds up, whereas this builds up right here on this beam. And what's happening is this is a very thick weave, and I'm on maybe placemat 5 or 6. Anyway, it's building up here to be quite thick. So when I'm in neutral, my shed is not in neutral. It's not even. So I actually have a shed when I'm sitting in neutral. The holes are lower than the slots at this time. That's when I lift it, the heddle slightly, that evens everything up. So as a result, it's I get a small shed. The up shed is quite small, and the down shed is quite large. And I think I won't be able to weave too much longer just because of the bulk here on this beam. I still have lots of warp on the back, and so what I'm probably going to do after this mug rug is cut it off and tie it on again and start and weave the next batch before it gets too bulky here. I really like how this dark green warp coordinates with the weft, so that if any little bits peek through, which I think it is doing in a few places, then you don't see it. It blends nicely with the yarn. There's so much variety in this yarn, so even when the repeats come, they're not all that predictable. They're not identical. The sections aren't identical to the previous one, which I like very much. Here's a close-up of the weave. I have a very cool light here in this part of my studio. In reality, I think these blues are a little warmer than what we're seeing here on camera. So I got 8 mug rugs off of that one warp. There's 7 here, 1 sold, which is nice. And they all have the same repeating between the brown and the blue, but there are slight differences, as you can see, which is really cool. This one doesn't have as much of the super dark blue. This one has a lot more of it. But I'm definitely getting a beachy vibe. I'm seeing sandbars and deep ocean water and a little bit of white surf. So I did it. I got exactly what I was going for. So I'm happy. So coming off the loom, these ended up being 5 inches long and just under 5 inches wide. So 4 3/4 width and 5 inches long. So they look like little rugs at that proportion, which is just great. And being 100% wool, they will soak up any drips if you spill your coffee. If you rinse it out right away, there shouldn't be any obvious lasting effects of having drinks spilled on this if they're rinsed out, but it will prevent the drinks from going off your table and onto the floor, because wool will soak up an awful lot. These are available in my store right now, so I'll put the link in the description below. And I'm off to dye another skein of this type of wool for a different color scheme. I know I can get 8 mug rugs from 1 skein of wool, so that's good. Maybe I'll dye 2 to get more out of it. The details on how I finished these mug rugs are in my previous video, my first try at making beachy mug rugs. So that's how I explain how I deal with the edges and how everything is kept nice and secure. Also how I weave in the tails from the weft yarn. So you can check the iCard above and also in the description below for a link to that video. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I also have a link to my Patreon. A big thank you to my patrons who are contributing to help me keep creating these videos. I really appreciate your support in all ways. I love your comments as well. Thank you for watching.